All right. I'm joined by Matthew Zator, who covers the Vancouver Canucks for the Hockey Writers, and mostly, and does a whole bunch of things actually, with videos and NHL at large, draft prospects, dabbles in the AHL as well. Just all over the place. Matthew is, and so great getting in touch, great getting in touch, and having you back on ice time. It's fun. It's always fun chatting hockey with you because you know a lot about hockey, obviously. Matthew, how are you doing?
Doing good. It's been a bit of a break with hockey right now. I've got, of course, the Olympics starting as we're recording tonight or tomorrow morning or whatever it is. It'll be tomorrow morning. Yeah, but yeah, it's been weird having no hockey for a bit here, and then it's just the Olympics. But yeah, doing well.
Yeah, it's such a weird period in the area because even at the AHL level, which I've been covering a lot of the AHL. Obviously, you have the All Star break, and it's a week with no hockey. It's one of those.
Yeah.
There's a Wednesday with no games, and I'm like, well, what do we do now? What do we do now? It's really hard for us hockey people to be like, what are we doing? So, but this is kind of a good time. It's a good time in general to do like reflections or look back at the season in general. But I want to ask you some stuff about the AHL league. I obviously know a lot about, and I want to start there with your general background. I'll ask you, on average, in a month or a week, what would you say? How many AHL games do you watch? And you could be honest and say, I watch like 3 or 4 YouTube videos or highlights on socials, and that's my basic background until the playoffs. But what, just to give us a perspective, because you cover the NHL, you watch obviously a lot of the NHL
Mhm.
as expected. But what do you? How many AHL games do you think you watch per week or month?
Yeah, mostly the highlights is the most of what I do for the AHL. I rarely watch full games during the season because the NHL is the most of my focus. But in the playoffs, like the Calder Cup playoffs, I usually watch, especially Abbotsford Canucks were in it last year, and then I watched almost every game in that. But during the regular season, I don't really watch. It's not readily available unless you subscribe to the AHL package that AHL.com gets through Flow Hockey. But I mean, I do watch highlights. I do cover like Abbotsford Canucks. I try to keep pretty well versed with them because other prospects down there. But this year, a lot of them are up in the NHL right now because of so many injuries and stuff like that. Abbotsford is the bottom of the league. They're not doing very well, mostly because of those injuries and the fact that there's just so many guys that didn't come back last season. So, but yeah, background AHL, I try to keep up with the Abbotsford. Um, and here I'm just 5 minutes away from the rink too, so I do go to games, actually go live to games too. So yeah.
That's the big thing, I think, which is important to know because you're in the Vancouver area. Abbotsford's in the Vancouver area. I don't know the area as well, but if I had to guess, Abbotsford's kind of a suburb city
Mhm.
to Vancouver, kind of similar to Laval, where Laval, some people will call Laval its own city, some people call it a suburb of Montreal, depending on who you ask. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of asking people from the area, but I'm sure it's similar with Vancouver. And I think what's interesting about that is that going to games, and that's something a very important thing about the AHL is the difference between watching the games and hockey in general is like this, but
Mhm.
going to the games as well. Going in person, just it's so much different of an experience, and I feel like that's a big thing, especially for the AHL, which is a league that you're sometimes you're focusing on one prospect. Scouts go
Mhm.
to these games. They don't watch the game. They'll watch one player and just they want to know, okay, what is this one player doing, or how is this player skating when they're away from the puck? The TV can't do that. I'll ask you though about that, following up on that, which is when you watch the AHL, what are you generally watching for? Because a lot of people they just tune in for the prospects, and that's pretty much what makes sense. Because that's your team's prospects. You want to know how they're doing at the AHL level. Maybe they could be on the NHL team, so you watch them. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, if you go to a game in person, you're going for free T-shirts or other cool promos that they do, or maybe you want to see something crazy. But something crazy might happen any given night, like a goalie fight or something crazy. So, but what do you? I'm going off a bit. But what do you generally? Would you say you watch? When I ask you, okay, you watched an AHL game, what's that first thing you say? Oh yeah, this is what I saw.
Mostly, yeah, it's focusing on the prospects because I mean, that's the development and knowing what, if they're ready for a call up or if they should get a call up of how they're playing. It's mostly the focus is on those young players. I do kind of keep an eye on some of the veterans too because these are the guys that could come up and fill in important spots in the lineup, even if they are a journeyman, 25 plus year old or even a 30-year old. They're good type depth guys, and the Canucks have been able to use some of those guys in the past where they've come up and helped in the bottom of the lineup. And Sammy Blais is a perfect example of that way back. It wasn't last season, but when he was signed to a Canucks contract, Vancouver, these guys, they're important too, and to watch them and how they're, even though they are a veteran and they're not developing anymore, you want to watch them to see if they could potentially help as well.
He's now in interesting Sammy Blais naming names. He's now in Montreal with Laval, and
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting because one of the fun things you're talking about these players, these young NHLers, and what's funny about that is a lot of times I'll talk to some of these players, and we talk about hockey players that it's like, oh yeah, they're old and they're 30. These players, they get called old at 24 years old,
Yeah.
and they're like, I'm 24, I'm still developing. It's really fascinating for to note that. And I think it's just an interesting note on that is that the way the season's unfolded at the AHL level is a lot of teams have given up on those prospects where they're saying we don't you're 23, 24, you're past your ELC, you're no longer what we call a prospect, you're no longer
Mhm.
developing, we're giving up on you as a player. And meanwhile, they're still developing. The teams I think that have bought into those type of players, call it Providence, or Providence has bought into them a bit where they've signed these 24, 25-year-old type of players that it's paying off for them twofold. But
Mhm.
I digress on that. If I were to ask you, or maybe someone generally asks you, what's a big storyline from the season so far, the AHL season? What is your response to that?
Right now, I mean, there's two goaltenders that I've been really focusing on, and Sebastian Cossa, I've been following him for a long time. I covered for the Red Wings for a bit there, and I also hosted Grindline for a number of years where, that he was a big focus. Like almost every episode we were talking about since he was drafted. He was drafted ahead of Wallstead, as everyone knows, a guy that's in the NHL right now and one of the better young goaltenders in the league. And I mean, Kosa has only I think a couple games under his belt at the NHL level, but he's just dominating the AHL right now. And second in goals against average. I mean the Grand Rapids Griffins are just they're playing really well, and I mean Kosa is one of the biggest reasons why. And then the other goaltender is Michael DiPietro, former Canucks prospect, way back, and he did play in not in Abbotsford, but in Utah not Utah, Utica,
Yeah, Utica.
in Utica there. I mean, he was I don't know if he wasn't that good in the AHL at that point, but goaltenders take a little bit longer to develop. And, you're talking about old, he's probably considered old at this point now. I don't know if we would call him just an AHL level goaltender. I was actually surprised that he didn't get claimed off waivers when Boston put him on had to put him on waivers, and he's got the best goals against average and ridiculous. His save percentage is just off the charts. He's barely lets anything in, 943. But yeah, those two goalies have been a huge storyline for me, and I mean Providence and Grand Rapids are two of the best teams in the league too.
It's fascinating. DiPietro, by the way, he won the award. There's an award for goaltender of the year, basically the equivalent of the Vezina in the AHL. He won it last year. So he was
Yeah,
already you saw, okay, this is an elite goaltender at this level for sure. At the
yeah.
AHL level. And yeah, there was talk about maybe he gets claimed off waivers. Some people have said that because he hasn't got claimed off waivers, that should tell you a lot about how NHL teams view him, which is a little fascinating.
Hmm.
But he followed up with another great season. And it's not just him, it's Sebastian Costa's had this type of season, or an elite season as well. And another goaltender is probably on that list. You'll probably notice is he's actually 21 years old. He's had a few NHL games. Is Sergei Mirashov, who
Yeah.
is in the Pittsburgh organization, and he's another goaltender that you're watching him play, and you're like, it's a matter of time before he gets an NHL shot, and he could be great in the NHL. He struggled in his NHL games, but it's a matter of time for him, and
Mhm.
it's fascinating because there's a lot of good goaltenders in the AHL this season. I was wondering if there's something to that or
Mhm.
whether it's goaltending is up. But I actually want to ask you why you feel like it feels like, especially with Murashov, for example, he is that they have Stuart Skinner, the Pittsburgh Penguins do. They have Tristan Jarr. I mean, they had Tristan Jarr. They have Artur Silovs, who actually
Mhm.
they did give a chance to. So he's actually
Yeah.
the goaltender that is at the AHL level and did great at the AHL level. And then the Canucks traded him because they said we can't protect him from waivers, so might as well trade him now. And they can't give, and they have another goaltender in the organization as well, Blomqvist, who
Mhm.
was projected potentially as an NHL goaltender, but they have four that all could be at the NHL level, but they can't give Murashov a chance. I'm wondering why you think teams maybe aren't as high on goaltenders because a lot of them, especially this season, a lot of them are playing great,
Mhm.
and you're like, all right, what more do they need to do? And
Yeah.
especially someone like DiPietro, you're wondering what more does he need to do? And I wonder
Yeah.
what, but then the NHL teams are saying, no, we'd rather have, take Boston, for example, Jonas Corposalo is their backup. Not a good backup, but they'd
Yeah.
rather have him than DiPietro. So why do you think it is NHL teams don't want to give those players a chance or really rely on them, call them up after all these great games?
It is really, especially with DiPietro, it's a little baffling. I mean, he is an undersized goalie. His NHL experience when he is in the NHL, his numbers aren't very good. I mean, maybe that's something that they're thinking that his ceiling is an AHL ceiling, like it's something that he's just not going to be able to even sustain himself as a backup. But I mean, you won't know that until you give him a chance in that position. It is interesting, especially with Boston, where they get Corpusalo. He wasn't, I mean, he was okay last season. But I mean, this season he's been again okay. It's not like would DiPietro do any worse? Especially under way less salary. I mean, his cap hit is a lot less than Corpusalo. Again, they'd have to trade Corpusalo or try to force him down to the AHL. It's kind of tough. So, I mean, there's those things in the background where contracts and salary. I mean, maybe that's why he's not giving a chance. I'm just surprised that no other team would give him a chance by claiming him off waivers for free. I mean, you don't know. I mean, a lot of teams have some goaltending problems and they're not giving him a chance. I mean, you're looking at I think one team should. I mean, the Canucks I think should have maybe claimed him way back when although at that point Demko and Lankinen were in there, so maybe not. But I mean, it is interesting. And Miroshov is an interesting one too. I mean, I was actually surprised when they traded Jari that they got Skinner. You trade Jari not getting a goaltender in return. I thought that was what was gonna happen, and that Murashov will get, you clear a bit of that log jam, and then he's got the chance with Shilovs potentially. I thought maybe that was the route they were going to go, but then they go and get Skinner in that deal. It's like, okay, I guess they don't feel that he's ready to take on the NHL. I mean, he is really young, so I mean, goaltending again, you take a while for a lot of goalies take a while to kind of develop into what they're supposed to be. So I mean, maybe that was interesting. I'd say Peters a more interesting one. Miroshov is just quite young still, so maybe they just feel he's not ready.
It is funny with DiPietro is that I actually I've talked to a few people in the AHL circles about not just DiPietro but in general goaltending. And with DiPietro, the question was, what more does he need to do? And his head coach said he honestly at this point he just needs an opportunity. He just needs
Yeah.
someone to give him that chance. And what is fascinating is that a lot of people who watch the AHL and NHL, they tell you the big differences. There's one that I think is concerning if you're great at the AHL level, but maybe you can't adjust to that at the NHL level. And then there's the other that you just wonder maybe it's just the AHL. So that's why some goaltenders ironically get better at the NHL level. So
Mhm.
the first thing that a lot of people point to the why goaltenders are great at the AHL level, but maybe struggle at the NHL level, is the league's so chaotic. NHL is so structured in how teams score, how teams attack defenses and goaltenders that there's a lot of there's a lot of one timers, a lot of centering passes that get it's everything's planned out. And if you're a technical goaltender where you know where the play is going, you can actually pick up the play and make you're better in those situations. Sometimes goaltenders who are just really athletic, who could just make those saves that off of chaos. The AHL, for contrast, is very chaotic. So
Mm.
they can make those saves off of chaos or just like a crazy bounce, and they're just athletic, so they can make up for it. So they dive on the
Mm.
puck or they dive out towards the player, they put a pad on it. That's one that I think if you're great, you can struggle even at the AHL level, but the NHL, okay, yeah, you can be better at that, ironically.
Mm.
Interesting. I think that's something that Wallstat, for example, he had
Yeah.
struggled in Iowa, and then he goes to the NHL and is great there. The part too that is fascinating to me is a lot of goaltenders talk about this too, is the skill is just that much better. It's just
Mm.
that little bit more better. I said to someone a few weeks ago at one of these games, or maybe even last week at this point. I don't know. It's all a blur, but I said Kyle Connor's not in the AHL. As in, if you have a shot like Kyle Connor does, or fill
Yeah.
in the blank, Cole Caulfield, Connor Bedard, whoever it is, those players are in the NHL. So
Yeah.
that extra accurate shot, those shots that thread the needle and hit the top right corner, go bar down in the top right corner or the top left corner, go far side, those sharp angle shots that go just above the pad and just below the glove or just
Mm.
above the leg, like all those shots don't exist in the AHL. They exist in the NHL. So that little extra skill, that little extra speed, and if a goaltender can't make that adjustment, there are some that talk about when they get that call up to the NHL that they realize, wow, it's
Mm.
that little extra bit that it is harder to adjust to that, and therefore some goaltenders struggle. So it is something to keep in mind. How important is an AHL team's success to the NHL team?
I mean, I think it's a big thing, especially I'm a real big proponent of teams playing the same way on both the NHL level and the AHL level. Where the system is the same. They're not going from a high flying run and gun and then they go up to the NHL and all of a sudden it's a defensive trap system. It's kind of tough to come up and be impactful when all of a sudden you have to switch completely how you're playing. I think a winning environment is huge. If you have a losing environment down there and you come up to the NHL and it is different. I mean, I guess if both match, it's not bad. I mean, right now the Canucks are in both. I mean, the Abbotsford team's Vancouver's bad. They're both bad. That doesn't really matter. But I think having a successful AHL team really boosts a lot, and that's what happened last season. With Abbotsford, they win the Calder Cup. They were a pretty successful team most of the time, and you got guys in the NHL now coming from that system. Max Sasson, Linus Carlson, where they're maybe not high end NHLers, but they're regular guys, and both of them are double digits in goals. They're making an impact after having a successful AHL season. I think it is huge, especially to have a good team down there, and that's why there's some teams that kind of. I mean, I think, but I mean, I guess it's a catch-22 when you're looking at it. You want to have a lot of your prospects playing the AHL, and maybe they're not that good at prospects, so your team's not that good. And then you got teams that say, well, we want to win, so they don't have a lot of prospects. They sign a lot of AHL veterans. They try to win, but I think that doesn't really help you either. So it's kind of tough to really say. It's like you want to have a winning team and a successful team, but you got to have the prospects, really good prospects to have a team that you're also as a development league as well.
And the other catch-22 to this is that you certainly don't want a losing culture because
Yeah.
a losing culture is where you see teams that have these top prospects that take a big step back in that year. You
Yeah.
look at you look at Bridgeport last year, where they're all their prospects who people were kind of excited about, and they're like, "Oh, maybe this guy can make it to the NHL, or maybe this player can take a step forward and be on the NHL team somehow, some way." And then after a disastrous season, they all take a step back, and they're
Yeah.
all a year behind now. And you look at what's happening now in Hartford, for example, or in Springfield with the
Hmm.
Blues affiliate. These prospects take a step back. And it's interesting because I wonder, this is obviously the debate that a lot of teams have, which is, does winning matter more, setting up a winning culture matter more, or playing the same system as our NHL team matter
Mm.
more? And I think a lot of teams will answer that saying, we want to mirror the NHL team. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
not a compliment, sometimes it's an insult saying, you play too much like your NHL team, and your NHL team is pretty bad, sometimes
Yeah.
very bad. That's not a compliment, but a lot of times it's you want to mirror the systems. They bring in a head coach who has the same systems in
Mm.
place as the NHL coach, but at the same time, that's the debate: is do you want to win? Building a winning culture at the AHL level and having those players go through a playoff run goes a
Mhm.
long way. I think the case in point is Abbotsford last season. All those players that went through that playoff run are now well prepared for the NHL. I
Yeah.
wonder what you think is more important. Is when I say how important is an AHL team to its NHL team, do you think winning matters more or systems matter more?
Again, it's tough because a good system should translate to winning, right? But I mean, the type of players and the quality of players, of course, matter as well. You can have the best system and not a lot of players that are able to play in that system is really big. If you have run and gun type system and you have no guys that have speed, you have no guys that have creativity and skill, you can't play that system. And that's happened a lot in the NHL teams where they're like, why aren't you playing? You coach a system that's, high flying, exciting before. Well, now you're coaching a defensive system. What's up? It's because they don't have the players to play a high flying system. So I mean that's always a thing. I think winning is more important. I mean, the systems, of course, may translate to it, but I think, the winning culture is the biggest thing. I mean, you don't want to have a losing, you're always down, you don't have a lot of hope in what you're doing. And then you try to get and move to the NHL and have that same, all of a sudden you're trying to flip a switch and you're like, okay, now we're winning here. I mean, I don't know. I think there has to be a match between the winning side is the biggest thing. I mean, I mean, ideally you have the same system both ways and they're both successful. But it's tough when you might not have the players to play that type of system.
And I think what's interesting is you talk about building winning cultures. That for years, the Hershey Bears, the standard is winning there. They're one of the teams that views it as we need to win first,
Yeah.
and if we develop in the process, that's going to come from winning. And you look at the Washington Capitals, that they've always had these prospects that come in that it's like, oh wow, this prospect overachieved. Connor
Yeah.
McMichael or whoever it is, they come in and it's like, and they're playing better than you'd expect. And you're wondering, why is that? Why are they all of a sudden a key part of the team? Ethan Frank is a recent example
Hmm.
who you watch him and you say, where did he come from? And it's because there was a winning culture. He was developed.
Hmm.
There's all those veterans there that also help you develop. That's another key.
Yeah.
And it helps. It's why the Capitals, their quote unquote rebuild or retool, it was a lot faster than most teams that take it, because they had all
Mm.
these prospects stored away in their system. And you look at this season, the teams that are really good in the AHL, the Providence Bruins, you look at the Grand Rapids Griffins, that their NHL teams, they're doing well. And you could credit that in part to having these players that are ready to, on the fly, get called up, and they're ready to go. And there's a winning culture in place at the AHL level. It's going to help your NHL team.
Mm.
And I think you look at those two teams, and they really, Providence and Grand Rapids, which is Boston and Detroit. It helps create that winning culture also at the NHL
Mm.
level, which I think is fascinating. What do you think the big story of the season, or what are you going to be watching as the season goes on?
I mean, I'm looking at. I'm still going to be following those. Grand Rapids is a big one. I think for Detroit in as a team, a lot of their prospects that are down there right now. I mean, they're not calling them up. I mean, it seems like they're. I haven't really seen much call ups, lately, where a lot of their guys are still down there, and they did send Michael Brantzig Nygaard down quite early in the season after he made the team, and he's really been really good down there since he's come back. I think Grand Rapids being a successful team is a big deal. Especially where last year, I mean, I believe they made the playoffs, but they didn't go very far. And they have been a bit of a struggling AHL team in the past, even with their prospects. And this season, it's kind of flipped a switch. And Kosa was good last season. He's out of this world this season. All the question marks are gone from him, which I think is a big thing for the Red Wings as well. They're the biggest team I think I'm watching for the rest of the season to see if they can keep that momentum going, being a top team in the AHL. I mean, I think that's a big thing when you're looking at. I mean, Detroit's always been a team in the past where they used their farm system, and I think that's something a lot of teams might not value their AHL team as much as some do. And it is a big deal to have a good solid farm system. And, I think Detroit's kind of starting to show that again.
I think what's interesting, you're mentioning Detroit a lot, and I think what's fascinating is you want to know what the trade deadline is going to look like. Look at some of the AHL teams, maybe look
Yeah.
at some of the prospects there, and I think that's going to be another fascinating layer to this. Is that the Red Wings are in the playoffs now, and Steve Eisman wants to make a big move. And I think what's interesting, people are talking about Jesper Wallstedt with the Wild, that he's on the trade block. If the Red Wings want to make a splash, Sebastian Costa might be the guy to do that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they make a move or which teams. That's something I think is going to be a little fascinating to watch. Is which teams take that swing where a lot of times you hear these teams say we can't trade our top prospect. He's untouchable. This
Yeah.
prospect's untouchable. But you want to make a big move, you want to make a big swing, and you want to make the playoffs. You might have to do one of those moves. So I think that's fascinating. I wonder what you think about that.
No, that's a good point, especially because Detroit, they have Trey Augustine in this system, and he's been dominating the NCAA. I mean, he's almost ready for not NHL maybe, but AHL time, and he's almost ready to be there. And I think he's on track to maybe even be better goaltender than Kosa. And where you're looking at, do you want, both of them in the system? Because I mean, that's great, where you're looking at two strong goaltenders, but you end up wanting to make a swing, and Kosa or even Augustine, I guess you could even throw him in there. You trade one of those goalies, and you might be able to get a pretty good return because they're both blue chip prospects. Both for, Augustine was a second rounder, but both high end type goaltending prospects, two of the best in the league. I mean, I don't know. I think the Red Wings are going to be one to watch, and then of course Wallstead being in there, not in the AHL anymore, but yeah, some of these high end prospects where they're having a good season, you might try and maybe parlay that into maybe a blockbuster trade here.
Yeah, you look at, let's say, a team that there are teams that in the NHL that need goaltending, and especially if they're rebuilding. You look at Robert Thomas might be on the trade block, and the Blues might need some goaltending. I'll just say
Yeah.
that. They might need some help in that, and they might ask for a goaltender. So, Robert Thomas, if you're trading him, you might want to get uh, an elite goaltender and some prospects on top of that.
Mm,
So, it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think there's not just goaltenders, but a lot of these teams that have these elite prospects in their system. But if you want to make a push for the cup, that you have to do that, and then it affects the league as a whole. It's why like the
yeah.
teams that are good now are not necessarily going to be good down the stretch or good for a playoff run. We're running a little low on time, so Matthew, I appreciate you joining. And while you're at it, and it's great talking again. It's been a while since I think the start of the season, so it's good having you back. Good having you back. And while you're at it, any plugs, anything you're working on? Now's your chance. The floor is yours.
Well, covering the Canucks, of course. A lot of they're going to be in the news a lot, probably in the next couple weeks, with their not, of course, not next week because the trade freeze is still in effect. But I think they're going to be a big player at the trade deadline. At least they should be trading a lot of their veteran guys, especially their UFAs. So I'll be writing about that. And then on the YouTube channel, we got Prospect Corner. We do that every week. So check that out if you're into prospects. And the draft is just around the corner. So we'll be doing a lot of that. So yeah, those are the two big things. And all of our videos on Hockey Writers YouTube channel, I'm really active there. So
Yeah, Matthew is actually one of the premier people to on YouTube. Really doing a lot of great stuff there. And check out all the YouTube videos that he you produced them all. So a lot of work goes into that. I can tell from experience that uploading my videos, so a lot goes into those. So it's check those out as well. Especially that there's the prospect one, there's the team focused ones, which are really cool to check out. A lot of good stuff there as well. And yeah, no, obviously the Canucks stuff, you got to follow Matthew with a lot of the stuff there because uh, they're one of the teams that's really always fascinating. But Matthew's on it and he understands the team very well. So make sure to check that out. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.